Joining us today, we have the two co-founders of Layer, Moritz and Konstantin. Moritz met Konstantin at Helping, the marketplace for cleaning services, where he was the company's global CFO and had to deal with spreadsheets daily. They struggled with keeping the company's financial model and business cases up to date at all times, which had tens of different tabs and hundreds of roles of assumption, and the lack of tools that offered a solution. That's when the idea of Layer was born, a platform bringing in a range of granular and version controls in your Excel files and Google Sheets.
Hello, everybody. Also from our side, it's great to be here today, and thanks for the kind introduction, Elena. Extremely happy to show you our application in action today. Layer is a collaboration platform that works on top of Excel and on top of Google Sheets. And we're thrilled to show you today how to turn on multiplayer mode for your financial models. So what are we going to do today? We're going to start off by giving you a little bit of background on why and how we started the company. We're going to tell you how Layer works on a very high level. We're going to explain why it's particularly relevant for finance folks, and then we'll jump right into it and show you the application in action. So let's start with a little bit of background. Elena briefly mentioned this in my previous life. I was CFO at a rocket internet startup in Berlin. And in that role, I was in charge of managing and maintaining the company's financial model. It was a 20 megabyte Excel file with 30 different tabs, hundreds of rows of assumptions. And it needed to be updated on a monthly basis. And that required input from roughly 25 people across the organization. So what did that process look like for me? First challenge I faced was I could not upload the financial model to a Dropbox and give 25 people access. Why not? Because the file contained a ton of very sensitive information. Like salary data, cash burn, cash balance, all of that. The second reason is that I would have lost control. If I had allowed 25 people to access and edit the file, there would have been no way for me to understand what was going on. What changes were made by whom, with what implications for the model, for the numbers, and there would have been no way for me to easily understand whether the model itself was still intact or not. So as a workaround, I had to create carve-outs and individual templates for the 25 people involved in that process. And those templates were circulated via email, and very often in parallel, I would send out calendar invites in order to remind the people to submit their inputs on time. Nevertheless, I had to chase and remind every single one of them to submit their data. And after I'd have all the updated templates received from the parties involved, an extremely tedious copy-paste exercise would start, whereby I would manually transfer and copy-paste the data from these 25 individual satellite files into the master file in order to create an update. Now, I'm sure that every single one of you who works in finance, and especially has to deal with FP&A use cases, can very much relate to the pain points mentioned here. Having to create carve-outs and templates, having to chase and remind colleagues to submit data, and having to manually copy-paste data between and across Excel files. Now, how do we go about this? How do we tackle these problems with Layer? We're very strong believers in spreadsheets, and we are convinced that they're never going to go away. This is why we've built a web application that sits on top of spreadsheets. Layer works with Excel and also Google Sheets. And we've built it in a way to keep adoption barriers as low as possible. So for you as a file owner, we make it super simple to get started. You can upload any file or connect a Google Sheet and set up a first flow within seconds. Also on the collaborator side, we try to keep things as simple and intuitive as possible. The collaborator receives a simple link, can access the relevant data in a web view, and submit any changes with a click of a button. We're going to show you all of that in a minute in the actual demo. Before that, a few words on why what we've built with Layer is particularly relevant for finance folks. Looking at the use case and process initially mentioned, and looking at any other FP&A use case as well, you see that these processes are typically super collaborative. You need to collect input from person A, You need to align with person B, you want to loop in person C, and there can be departments, other colleagues, management, investors, etc., etc. Now, with our collaboration features, we allow you to turn finance models into multiplayer files. And we've built 3 core feature sets for that. The first one is access management. With Layer, you can share any part of your spreadsheet, whether it's a single cell, a range, a tab, or the entire file, or any combination. All of that feasible with a click of a button. The second feature set is version control. Whenever something is changed, you can review, accept, or reject that change, and you can always go back in time and restore previous versions of your file when needed. Lastly, we've built a ton of functionality around collaboration, allowing users to very easily communicate on top of their spreadsheets, define and assign tasks, and Layer takes care of due dates, notifications, and reminders. So we've built these collaboration features to make your life easier in order to allow you to spend less time on dull data operations and focus more on value-adding tasks. Now, without further ado, let me hand over the virtual mic to Consti, who will show you what Layer looks like exactly and show you the tool in action. Enjoy the product demo.
All right, thanks, Mo. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Super excited to show you what we've been working on at Layer. You should be able to see the application. And as Mo said, it's web application, and you simply create an account without any installation or implementation when needed. So 0 adoption barriers. And to get going with Layer is equally simple. Just pick an Excel file that you want to collaborate with others, drag it into the application. That's all you need to do to get going. If you would, you could also connect the Google Sheet if this is what's also used in your organization. Now, before I show you how you start collaborating with others, let's look at the file that I'll be using for this demo. And it's something that probably you have seen in your careers numerous times. It's a very, very simple, small financial model consisting of 2 output sheets. Here we have a P&L, we have a summary sheet, and then we have 4 input sheets that feed these output sheets. Assumptions, a headcount plan, some OPEX, and actuals. Now, the second reasons why I'm opening up that screen is because we're already looking at the core component that we've built at Layer, and that is what we call Layer Sheets. And Layer Sheets is essentially our own browser-based spreadsheet editor that allows us to take whatever it is that you have in your offline Excel files, replicate that, put that onto the web for it to be shared and edited in Teams. So we can preserve what's there in Excel, all the good stuff, but we can complement it with features that we believe so far have been lacking in the universe of spreadsheets. Now, in order to start collaborating with others, you have to create what in Layer is called a flow. And a flow essentially governs access management and it governs task management. So let's create one. Essentially, when creating a flow, you're guided through 3 simple steps. At first, you decide what data you want to make available. Then you decide who you want to make this data available to. And third, you can assign tasks. So let's pick a very simple example. Let's assume we are in a rolling forecasting process whereby we want to collect data inputs for our financial model. And in this case, let's assume we want to share the HR sheet with our HR manager. Now in Layer, you can do this without slicing and dicing the file, simply through our application. How you do this is adding any sheet that you want to. You could also add, if you would like to, I don't know, part of the P&L, for example, for context reasons. The whole idea here is that you can be very flexible. And there are no limits as to what you are able to share, from a single cell to the entire file and anything in between. And Layer then will take care of all the reference handling in the back, so that to make sure that the files don't break. Now, there's tons of other things that I'm not going to go into detail here, but you could also add cell-based lockings, for example, approval workflows, all these kind of things. Now, the next step is making sure or deciding how you want to make the data available. And the default is Layer Sheets. So essentially, you'd ping out a link to your collaborators. When clicked on, that points to that part of the file you want them to see and work on in the browser. They edit there, done. If your organization also uses Google Sheets, you could very conveniently from the Layer app carve out any bit and piece of the Excel file and make it available as a Google Sheet as well. And if you're dealing with big files or you need the computational power of your desktop machines, you could allow for an optional Excel download of the part of the file as well. Now, next, let's add who we want to collaborate with. For demo reasons, I'm going to add myself here. Then I'm going to give a title, and it probably makes sense to call this HR update. And then you could also add a message, instructions in that little box here as well. Lastly, and this is all you need to do before you're done, is assigning a task. In our case, we want edits to happen, so we can activate this toggle here on the request input. That allows us to add a deadline, let's say Friday next week. And the cool thing about these due dates and deadlines is that what you're essentially doing, you're outsourcing all the people chasing bits and pieces to the application. Why? Because the application will send out reminders to your collaborators 2 days before the deadline, on the day of the deadline, so that you don't have to. Something that I always particularly disliked doing back in the day. Now, if we're dealing with a repetitive process, and forecasting may well be one, you could also add automation there, which would mean then the tasks and everything associated with that workflow would update in that set rhythm. So you set this up once, and then it runs forever. If I hit share, that's all we need to do to create our first flow. So really from start to start using the tool to starting the collaboration with people, it's only a couple of clicks. Now, how does a flow look like? Let's open the one up we've just created. Essentially, it's a very simple concept. We're providing web-based viewpoints into your master file, which means that any given flow is a place of collaboration with the people that you invite to it. And obviously you have the grid or the spreadsheet as the main workspace, and then you have a smart chat on top of that, so that you don't have to go to Teams or Slack or to an email thread to communicate with the people that you're working on. It's contextualized right there where you need it on the grid. On top of that, you have access, and so have all the participants of this flow, to a version history. So you can always have the ability to go back in time, which of course increases transparency and control quite a bit. Now, how does this look like for the collaborators? Now, for that, we're going to switch perspectives, and we're going to head over to my inbox, where now we should have received an email from Leia. There it is. And if we don't want our collaborators to create a Layer account, they don't have to, which lowers the adoption barriers for your team members quite a bit. So the only thing that they need to do, they need to click on a link provided in the email, and that, as mentioned before, points to only the part of the file that you want them to see. Here we are. The interface is exactly the same, mirrored like the one we just looked at from the admin perspective, and now the work can happen. Layer Sheets supports almost 450 of the most common Excel formulas, everything you need to build a good financial model, the sum products, the index matches, and so forth. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to change a couple of figures here. I'm going to change maybe 2 salaries here. And then let me also smuggle in an error. And I'm sure you all know how easily errors or typos slip in when working with spreadsheets. And if you don't catch them early, then this may lead to a long time of reconciliation further down the road. What I'm going to do here, let me change this 12 into an 11. So tiny error, hard to spot. I'm going to show you how we surface this with Layer. Now, optionally, you can add a message. The only thing you need to do as a collaborator is when you're done editing, you hit the submit button, and that's all you need to do. Now, heading back over to the admin view of things, what you might already be seeing here is that the flow we've set up just a minute ago now has a status tag associated to it. It says review needed. A big part of Layer's value proposition is that Layer will always keep track and call out any changes that happen anywhere in your spreadsheets that are connected to the application so that you don't have to. Regardless of whether you're collaborating with one person or 100, Layer will call out these changes and make you aware of them. So let's look at them. I open up the flow. You have a visual cue in the top left corner that signals that there are changes for us to review. Let's click that button. Let's look at them. We've built quite a bit of functionality to speed up the review process and to make sure that any error surfaces before they make their way into the master file. Now, there's a couple of very obvious features here that you probably also, or that I would like to highlight here. The first is a color coding. So we've built color coding to draw the attention to the cells that need them. So in dark blue is changes highlighted that are directly added by the user. In light blue, we speak of indirect changes because of formulas. And then in purple is really formulas that have been changed. So right now, when you start editing, you know where to look at. On top of that, we've built a change log, a very intuitive one. So if you navigate to a cell that has been changed in the top left corner, you see the old value and the proposed new one, and we use the same notation. This is when really Layer becomes very powerful to surface errors like this one when we apply that change log to formulas. So in a split second, we understand what's going on here. The 2 has been changed to a 1. And now that we've surfaced this, we could go back to the chat, start asking questions, and make sure that what we're seeing is correct or not. Now, after the review step is when you would normally consolidate. And this is where we've created very consciously a gatekeeping functionality. So although we're dealing with editing on the web, anything that a collaborator will edit will not automatically flow into your master file, because you are sort of the gatekeeper of the changes, which means that anything that you don't want in your master file, you can ignore, like so. So for example, that formula change, let's assume that's an error. Let's ignore that. And if we hit the accept button, which will trigger the consolidation process, anything or all but the ignored changes will be merged into my master. And that's obviously a very obvious benefit because that means no more copy pasting. So if you're dealing with data collection quite a bit from different sort of files from a large group of or larger group of people, then you should give Layer a go because no more copy pasting, just a single click of a button to consolidate. Now, if we go back to the file view, which I showed you in the beginning of the demo, you can see here that a new version has been created. And essentially what we've built is a version control system for spreadsheets, which leads to, although you might be collaborating with 1 or 100 people on the same file, it all comes back to one coherent version history that is available for you in the Layer online archive. You can go back to old versions, you can restore them, you can download them, and no more file chaos, no more weird sort of saving file names with long cryptic names, no more of that. Now, there's a lot more to the Layer application. And then I just show you, I'd invite everybody to head over to www.golayer.io to check it out for yourself. It's free. You can get going with just a couple of minutes. And in the second half of this year, we'll be adding a whole new dimension to the tool, because this is when we'll be adding integration. So far, we have been optimizing the Layer experience for collaboration with people. And then in the second half of the year, you'll be able to connect different data sources, such as your CRM systems, your data warehouse, or your accounting tools to pull in data automatically into your files, and also to push data to other systems and between files. And this is how we want to make the vision of building the connective tissue for spreadsheets real. Now, thanks a lot for bearing with me, and I hand over back to Moritz, who will conclude the presentation with going over a couple of use cases for Layer.
Thank you, Konsti. So as we conclude our presentation and before we head into the Q&A session, a few words on use cases. So we've mentioned FP&A use cases already. Think planning, budgeting, or reporting. all of those super collaborative processes. There are a couple of ones that we see frequently implemented for Layer at different companies. One is headcount planning. The benefits across these different use cases that I'm going to walk you through are quite similar. The value proposition is always similar, and you're going to recognize the pattern quickly. The use cases, however, are fundamentally different. In headcount planning, these companies that use Layer often have a single file, their source of truth for anything that's headcount related and with all HR costs. Now, Layer allows them to share protect the sensitive data like salaries, etc., in these files, while sharing the relevant parts with the different people who need to feed in data and to provide updates, different department heads, for example. Now, once these department heads are done with their changes, have submitted their changes, you can, with the click of a button, consolidate all of them back into the master file in order to keep your single source of truth on HR costs, on headcount, up to date at any point in time. Totally different use case, but similar value proposition, expense tracking. Here again, you can keep one central file with an overview on all your costs, all your expenses. And here again, whether you work with different project teams who need to enter expense information, whether it's different departments, you can very easily share the respective parts of your spreadsheets with them, automatically merge their changes, their updates, new expense items entered whenever there is an update, and pull all of that very easily with a click of a button into your single source of truth on costs and expenses. The last use case we would like to quickly show you is portfolio reporting. It's a use case that we see adopted quite frequently, especially recently. And these files typically have a structure which looks as follows. It has an input section where they have individual tabs for the different portfolio companies to feed in information. It's a template structure. But these files often also have an output section with different reports, aggregate data, visualizations, comparison between different portfolio companies, all of that. And they can potentially be shared with the investors, their limited partners. So they use Layer in order to set up mostly recurring flows, recurring and repeating data collection, whether it's on a monthly or quarterly level. Layer, of course, takes care of all the reminders, due dates, notifications. So the funds or the investors at all time have full transparency on what needs to be submitted, who's overdue, and might need a little nudge. And once the data is submitted, you can merge all of that with a click of a button and share the output section parts with your investors again. Now, as mentioned, Layer works on top of every file, Excel or Google Sheets. And so the applications and the use cases really are limitless. I'm pretty sure that you are already thinking about use cases or individual files that you've encountered in the past where you would say Layer could have been really, really helpful. So again, we're an horizontal tool, work for almost any use case, any Excel or Google Sheet where collaboration plays a big role. Now that concludes our presentation. Thanks a lot, and we're now happy to answer any questions you may have.
We see our customer success manager, Pradeep, has already mentioned a couple or answered a couple of questions in the chat. Nevertheless, if you have questions, keep them coming and we're happy to answer them now. All right. Anyways, we'll be here the entire day. Pradeep will be there in our booth. So if you want to learn more about Layer, you either can head over to our website, GoLayer.io, or find us in our booth and we can chat there in private. So thanks a lot. There is one. And could you maybe put the last question up? Perfect. Can I share specific tabs to specific user within the same file and also password protect them? Yes, you can. So you can very flexibly make any part of the file available to a specific user. So and then you can also password protect them, and you can also lock individual cells. what happens if the file has queries from Power Query on them? Would you need to refresh the queries and re-upload? Mo, this might be one for you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So our approach in general is really to keep things as easy as possible, right, and keep adoption barriers low. So we want to allow users to work as much as it like in their known tools, namely Excel and Google Sheets. And so obviously it's a priority for us to make syncing between layer and your respective file as easy as possible. Now that obviously already happens automatically in the case of Google Sheets because they sit on the web anyways. For Excel, what we've done is we built a add-in that allows you to very quickly and easily sync between layer and your offline file that sits on your desktop or in any other folder on your machine, to sync these two files with a click of a button. So whenever you receive updates from colleagues, you can merge them in and pull the latest version from layer with a click of a button into your local file and then run any query that you may have in Power Query. What we're going to do in the future is to facilitate the work between these different platforms even more with integrations into Dropbox, Google Drive, etc., so that even the integration or the add-in is not even going to be needed in the future, because we're going to allow live syncing between the versions that sit on layer and the ones that sit in your files or in any file repository.
Thank you, Thea. Next question is this product compatible with other add-ins? So it usually is compatible. So we're not an add-in per se, since you upload files to the layer web application. Compatibility is usually not an issue, because what we need to do in order to process these files has nothing to do with the add-ins that are installed in your Excel desktop version. With regards to costs, just another question that popped up. We price. We have a 4-tier based subscription based pricing, whereby we have a freemium version that will forever be free. Premium version includes 1 admin account and up to 5 collaborator accounts. And then it goes up to a bespoke enterprise version and 2 paid tiers that mostly discriminate on the number of collaborator seats. A plus version for 100 euros a month, and then a pro version for 300 euros per month.
There seems to be one more question. Is there going to be a professional version? Not sure who that came from. So Pradeep is our customer success manager. Not sure if I understand the question correctly. What exactly is meant by a professional version?
But to try to answer this, so it's as professional as it gets, meaning that we typically target B2B users. The tool is already in use, and we have customers from a broad range of companies, from smaller startups to big multinationals. So in that sense, it's a professional grade enterprise application that is in use within the B2B segment. Anthony asks about an added layer of security plus integration with the CRM. So this is something we anyway have on our agenda. So I just briefly talked about the integrations that we'd like to offer. CRM is very, very high up on the list. And if it would be okay for you, Anthony, if you have a couple of minutes to chat with Pradeep, we'd love to get your requirements and see when CRM integration would be available. and so that we can make sure that what we have lined up really fits your needs. And the same holds true for the security layer. There's a couple of things we're currently working on and rolling out, from single sign-on to a couple of other certifications, but also here would be great to understand your distinct requirements. All right, any more questions? Cool. Yeah, Pradeep, if you would reach out to Anthony, that would be great. All right. In case there are no further questions, thanks a lot for bearing with us. It was great to show you what Layer can do. And we hope that you all try out whether Layer can help you with your collaborative processes. Wishing you all a fantastic last day at the Global Excel Summit. It's been a blast. Everyone, thanks a lot.
Thank you.